It is imperative to understand and remember that development is a lifelong process that helps one gain a wider perspective on the meaning and impact of one's own life experiences, and to understand what childhood practices shaped my childhood. Key components of Erikson's model of human development include 8 stages: infancy, toddlerhood, preschool years, early school years, adolescence, young adulthood, middle adulthood, and late adulthood. We'll talk about the first 7. Stage 1, trust versus mistrust. My parents and caregivers all met my basic needs. Because my needs were met, I learned that relying on others was safe. I always felt loved as a small child. Stage 2, autonomy versus shame and doubt. I was given independence and allowed to explore on my own. This fostered self-confidence at an early age and grew into self-efficacy, allowing me to grow that sense of confidence in my abilities. Stage 3, initiative versus guilt. During the preschool years, I learned to assert myself and to speak up when I needed something. The Catholic nuns greeted me with a positive reaction, teaching me that taking initiative is a helpful behavior, and I began to take the lead. I believe this was the stage that began to form me into the person God had created me to be. I began to sing and lead in the church choir. I was the self-appointed guardian for the smaller kids in the playground. I studied hard to excel and listened attentively to my wise grandmother. Stage 4, industry versus inferiority. I compared myself with peers and knew that I was accomplished in relation to them. While I don't believe I ever demonstrated feeling superior to anyone, this sense of accomplishment did help to develop a strong self-esteem. Stage 5, identity versus role confusion. Adolescence is all about developing a sense of self. My siblings told me I grew up with strong goals and more self-knowledge than most teenagers. I wanted desperately to break free from my parents, but this was only to pursue my own interests rather than to try and live up to their personal expectations of who I should be. Stage 6, intimacy versus isolation. In young adulthood, which begins roughly at age 20, for me it began at age 19, just after leaving home to go off to college. I was desperate to find my place in life as a young adult. As my parents had already created one for me in their minds, I was expected to go off to college and to become an attorney. I became defiant when my parents stopped listening to what I needed and what I wanted. I had tried to form lifelong friendships, but they discouraged it. I was ready to enter into a committed relationship, but they forbid it. During this season, I struggled to develop intimacy and suffered through isolation. As a result, I began to lose myself in all of what I wanted to be. I became pregnant at 19 and hid the pregnancy from my parents the entire time. After delivering twin boys in 1989, I found myself having to make the most difficult decision of my entire life. My mom turned her back on me, and Dad told me the decision would have to be mine alone. Reluctantly, I put the boys up for adoption and lived the next 10 years in an emotional sequester and mild depression. Isolated and alone, I sought out my lifelong friend who I had known since adolescence. Together with other women she knew, they began to pray with me and over me. Here I began to develop a relationship with the Lord and understood I would need to fully surrender to Him in order to be well again. I let Him carry my burdens. Stage 7, generativity versus stagnation. Entering middle adulthood, I was blessed with 2 more boys who I brought up as a single mom. I returned to school, received my paralegal certificate, and I gave my life to Jesus, and He brought me peace and the man that would become my husband. We served the Lord as a family and still do today. We married and effortlessly became a family of four as he took on the role of husband and father of two boys. I began to understand what it meant to submit to my husband. I enjoyed being his helpmate. The Lord blessed us with Gianna in 2006, and the emotional sequester commenced yet again. Although Scripture reminds us that the thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy, John 10:10, I could tell something was off. In September 2019, I undergo life-threatening surgery and am hospitalized for 2 months. 4 months later, my husband and daughter are in a head-on collision. In March, COVID hits the country, bringing about distancing, and then my world fell apart. My worst fear came true. My husband of 17 years had been unfaithful. Unable and unwilling to listen, I removed him from the marital home at once. My frustration turned to anger, and before long I was filled with rage, the kind that doesn't allow you to think or sleep or be rational. But Gianna was watching, and I had to remember that my words and actions would follow her the rest of her life. So I prayed, and I fought on my knees. During the separation, God called me to study. CCU was not on my radar, and applied psychology was not a subject I cared to learn any more about. But the Lord was clear. These studies would be for me, first and foremost. I needed to understand zebra so that tomorrow I could understand and help others. Not an easy task. However, when your compass is pointing north and you understand that you are being guided by the one that created you for his purpose, you follow the narrow path. Enter by the narrow gate, he said, for the gate is wide and the way is easy that leads to destruction, and those who enter by it are many. For the gate is narrow and the way is hard that leads to life, and those who find it are few. Matthew 7:13-14. At the end of 6 months, the Lord brought my husband home to us, and with a renewed heart, repentant, ashamed, and lost, we decided it was time to put God back into the driver's seat. Renewing our commitment to each other was imperative, and today my husband and I work hard to share our testimony about God's lessons. We understand that all things work for good to those who love the Lord and have been called to his purpose. Graduating CCU is truly a lifelong dream for me, and it's our heart's desire to minister to other families in need. We continue to pray for guidance and wisdom as we purpose to share our story and message on healing.